Let's talk a little bit about Lent and what Lent is not. First of all, Lent is not Catholic. It's not exclusively Catholic. It was started, like most things, with the Catholic Church, and that's because there weren't any Protestants around until about 500 years ago. So Lent is not exclusively Catholic. A number of Protestant denominations observe it. Episcopalians, Lutherans, Presbyterians, Methodists. Heck, I've even known some Baptists to observe it. So Lent is not the exclusive purview of Catholics. Lots of people from lots of different Christian traditions observe the season of Lent, that is the 40 days before Easter, between Ash Wednesday and Easter, that doesn't take into account the Sundays that fall during that time in those 40 days. So it's about 6.5 weeks total, counted as 40 days of Lent. The second thing Lent is, it's not biblical. It is part of the church tradition. Started with the early church. It was a time in which new converts would prepare and get ready to join the church, which they would do at the Easter Vigil the night before Easter. They would be baptized and they would stay up all night. They would be baptized, they would join the church. And this time of Lent was a time of preparation. And the 40 days is taken from the time that Jesus spent out in the wilderness. All three synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, talk about a time close to the beginning of each gospel that Jesus was driven out into the wilderness, and Jesus spends 40 days out in the wilderness fasting, at the end of which he is tempted by the devil. He refuses all of the devil's entreaties and goes on to begin his formal ministry. So these 40 days that people would prepare to join the church were to mirror that time that Jesus spent out in the wilderness before he began his official formal ministry. So it is a tradition of the church, not actually biblical. And the other thing that Lent is not, well, there are many things Lent is not, but the other thing I want to talk about is Lent is not about suffering. It's gotten a little twisted over the years, partly because, it does go back and honors those 40 days that Jesus spent out in the desert without eating, fasting. And then it also, at a time when the church was terribly judgmental, I know this is hard to believe, but at a time when the powers that be in the church decided that certain people weren't worthy and couldn't come take communion, Lent became a time when those people who had been cast out could take that time to make themselves worthy again by fasting and doing all sorts of other things that weren't very pleasant, that showed their devotion and how sorry they were. It's not a banner time for the church and not something anyone should be proud of, but it happened. And those are some things that have morphed into this idea that Lent is a time that we are supposed to suffer like Jesus suffered for us on the cross. And so there's a lot of problems with that. First of all, we're giving up chocolate. Doesn't even come near to what Jesus experienced on the cross. And I think life provides enough suffering on its own without us going out looking to create more for ourselves. The idea that Jesus wants us to suffer for 40 days makes no sense. Nor could we ever imagine approaching the suffering that Jesus experienced. So instead of time of suffering, Lent should be a time of introspection. It should be a time of devotion, a time of discipline. That discipline doesn't always mean giving up something. It can mean taking on something. But whatever we give up or take on should be something that helps us get closer to God, that helps us become closer to being the person God created us to be. And so in that, while Lent is a solemn and serious thing, it should be entered into with joy and great expectations. We should be excited and grateful for this time set aside for us to spend some time thinking about God, thinking about our relationship with God, letting go of those things that keep us from God and taking on practices that bring us closer to God. So I hope that all of you will embark on some kind of Lenten practice this year. It is a gift. It is a wonderful thing to be able to do, to take that time between Ash Wednesday, which this year is February 17th, and Easter, and get closer to God and get closer to being the person that you know God has created you to be. So you are welcome to join us at Doubting Believer as we do Lent on lockdown, reclaiming the holy in your home. It is 40 days of scripture, reflections, and prayers that revolve around places and spaces in your own home and help you reclaim the holy and the joy that is found in our own homes. At a time when our homes have become a little more circus than sanctuary. But however you choose to observe Lent, I urge you to enter into it with a sense of joy and gratitude and wondrous expectations. I hope you all have a blessed Lent.